Hello, and thank you for joining us on News Roundup, coming to you from Brian Television. I'm Tunde Alabi, and the program is a compilation of major stories in the week ending. UK British Prime Minister Theresa May has insisted countries must have control over their borders in order to retain the confidence of the people and stop criminals from gaining access. She disclosed this while addressing the United Nations General Assembly in New York.
It should be clear that there is nothing wrong with the desire to migrate for a better life, and also that controlled, legal, safe economic migration brings benefits to our economies. But countries have to be able to exercise control over their borders. The failure to do so erodes public confidence, fuels international crime, damages economies, and reduces the resources for those who genuinely need protection and whose rights under the Refugee Convention should always be fulfilled. I believe there are three fundamental principles that we now need to establish at the heart of a new approach to managing migration that is in the interests of all those involved. First, we must help ensure that refugees claim asylum in the first safe country they reach. The current trend of onward movements, where refugees reach a safe country but then press on with their journey, can only benefit criminal gangs and expose refugees to grave danger. So we must all do more to support countries where the refugees first arrive, to provide the necessary protection and assistance for refugees safely and swiftly, and to help countries adapt to the huge economic impact that refugees can have, including on their existing population. As we are seeing in Jordan, Lebanon and Turkey, when the right assistance is provided, solutions that provide sanctuary and opportunity to refugees and opportunities for those hosting them can be found. This is also good for the refugees and the countries they come from, because the closer they stay to home, the easier it will be for them to return and rebuild after the conflict. Second, we need to improve the ways we distinguish between refugees fleeing persecution and economic migrants. I believe we must ensure the existing convention and protocol are properly applied to provide protection to refugees and reduce the incentives for economic migrants to use illegal routes. This in turn will help us target support for those refugees who need it most and retain the support of our populations for doing so. Third, we need a better overall approach to managing economic migration, which recognises that all countries have the right to control their borders and that we must all commit to accepting the return of our own nationals when they have no right to remain elsewhere. By ensuring a managed and controlled international migration response, and at the same time investing to tackle the underlying drivers of displacement and migration at source, we can reject isolationism and xenophobia, achieving better outcomes for all of our citizens, and particularly for the most vulnerable.
The Prime Minister, while speaking, challenged world leaders to rise up to new organized criminal gangs engaging in trafficking men and women across borders for exploitation in modern slavery.
So we must also face up to the fact that some of the worst human rights abuses that we thought we had confined to the history books have re-emerged in new pernicious forms. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, proclaimed by the General Assembly, stated that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, that no one should be held in slavery or servitude, and that slavery and the slave trade should be prohibited in all their forms. Yet nearly 70 years on, we are presented with a new form of slavery, modern slavery. Organised crime groups who are largely behind this modern slavery lure, dupe and force innocent men, women and children into extreme forms of exploitation. Trafficked and sold across borders, victims are forced into living the kind of inhumane existence that is almost too much for our imagination. These criminals have global networks to help them make money out of some of the world's most vulnerable people. Victims are held captive in squalid conditions under the constant shadow of violence and forced into sex and labour exploitation. If we are going to succeed in stamping out this abhorrent crime and bring the perpetrators to justice, We need to confront the reality of what we are dealing with. These organised crime groups work across borders and jurisdictions. They often use the internet and modern technology to recruit, transport, control and exploit their victims, all the while staying ahead of legal systems that are often constrained by traditional geographical boundaries. So we must take action. We must use our international law enforcement networks to track these criminals down, wherever they are in the world, and put them behind bars where they belong. We need to be smarter and even more coordinated than the criminal gangs in our efforts to stop them. In the UK, I'm setting up the first ever government task force for modern slavery, bringing together every relevant department to coordinate and drive all our efforts in the battle against this cruel exploitation. We are also using our aid budget to create a dedicated fund focused on high-risk countries where we know victims are regularly trafficked to the UK. And yesterday, I committed the first £5 million from this fund to work in Nigeria to reduce the vulnerability of potential victims and step up the fight against those who seek to profit from this crime. But if we are to meet the Sustainable Development Goal to eradicate modern slavery, we need to go much further. Security relationships have developed between so many countries for dealing with issues like counter-terrorism, cybersecurity, drug trafficking, and wider intelligence sharing. But we do not have a similar relationship for this fight against modern slavery. So we need our law enforcement agencies to work together, with joint investigation teams working across multiple countries. Victims will only find freedom if we cultivate a radically new, global and coordinated approach to defeat this vile crime. Together, we must work tirelessly to preserve the freedoms and values that have defined our United Nations from its inception. Together, we must work tirelessly to restore these freedoms and values to the lives of the men, women and children who are exploited for profit and held captive with little or no chance of escape. From the St. James's Palace Declaration and the Atlantic Charter forged by Winston Churchill and President Roosevelt, to the first meeting of this General Assembly in London in 1946, the United Kingdom has always been an outward-facing global partner at the heart of international efforts to secure peace and prosperity for all our people. And that is how we will remain. For when the British people voted to leave the EU, they did not vote to turn inwards or walk away from any of our partners in the world. Faced with challenges like migration, a desire for greater control of their country, and a mounting sense that globalization is leaving working people behind, they demanded a politics that is more in touch with their concerns and bold action to address them.
US President Barack Obama has said that Africa remains one of the fastest growing economies that is ready for global business. President Obama noted that people face conflict, hunger, and disease in Africa. The continent has, however, shown that it prefers trade over AIDS.
Africa's rise is not just important to Africa, it's important to the entire world. Yes, too many people across the continent still face conflict and hunger and disease. And yes, recent years have brought some stiff economic headwinds. And we have to be relentless in our efforts to end conflicts and improve security and promote justice. At the same time, the broader trajectory of Africa is unmistakable. Thanks to many of you, Africa is on the move, home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world and a middle class projected to grow to more than 1 billion customers. An Africa of telecom companies and clean tech startups and silicon savannas, all powered by the youngest population anywhere on the planet. As president, I've worked to transform our relationship with Africa so that we're working together as equal partners. I'm proud to be the first American president to visit sub-Saharan Africa 4 times, the first to visit Ethiopia and speak before the African Union, the first to visit Kenya, which I think was obligatory. I would have been in trouble if I hadn't have done that. I believe I'm also the first American president to dance the Lipala in Nairobi, or to try to dance the Lipala. And wherever I've gone, from Senegal to South Africa, Africans insist they do not just want aid, they want trade. They want partners, not patrons. They want to do business and grow businesses and create value and companies that will last and that will help to build a great future for the continent. And the United States is determined to be that partner for the long term, to accelerate the next era of African growth for all Africans. And that's why over the past 8 years, we've dramatically expanded our economic engagement. With your support, we renewed the African Growth and Opportunity Act for another decade, giving African nations unprecedented access to American markets. We launched Trade Africa so that African countries can sell goods and services more easily across borders, both within Africa and with the United States. We created Doing Business in Africa campaign to help American businesses, including small businesses, pursue opportunities across Africa. And under Penny's leadership, nearly 300 American companies have taken trade missions to Africa, with more than 8,000 African buyers attending U.S. trade shows. If you are an African entrepreneur or an American entrepreneur looking for more support, more capital, more technical assistance, there has never been a better time to partner with the United States. Commitments from the Export-Import Bank and the U.S. Trade and Development Agency have doubled. OPIC investments have tripled. Nearly 70% of Millennium Challenge Corporation compacts are now with African countries. And we've opened up and expanded new trade and investment offices from Ghana to Mozambique. Through our landmark Power Africa initiative, the United States is mobilizing more than 130 public and private sector partners and over $52 billion to double electricity access across sub-Saharan Africa. Meanwhile, our global entrepreneurship summits in Morocco and Kenya and our Young African Leaders Initiative are giving nearly 300,000 talented, striving young Africans the tools and networks to become the entrepreneurs and business leaders of the future. And we've got some of those outstanding young people here today. And 2 years ago, I welcomed many of you to our first ever U.S.-Africa Business Forum, where we announced billions of dollars in new trade and investment between our countries. And you can see the results. American investment in Africa is up 70%. U.S. exports to Africa have surged. Iconic companies, FedEx, Kellogg's, Google, are growing their presence on the continent. You can hail an Uber in Lagos or Kampala. In the 2 years since our last forum, American and African companies have concluded deals worth nearly $15 billion, which will support African development across the board, from manufacturing to healthcare to renewable energy. Microsoft and Mawingo Networks are partnering to provide low-cost broadband to rural Kenyans. Procter & Gamble is expanding a plant in South Africa. MasterCard will work with Ethiopian banks so that more Ethiopians can send home remittances. These are all serious commitments. New relationships are being forged, and I'm pleased that altogether, the deals and commitments being announced at this forum add up to more than $9 billion in trade and investment with Africa. So we are making progress, but we're just scratching the surface. We have so much more work that can be done and will be done. The fact is that despite significant growth in much of the continent, Africa's entire GDP is still only about the GDP of France. Only a fraction of American exports, about 2%, go to Africa. So there's still so much untapped potential. And I may only be in this office for a few more months, but let me suggest a few areas where we need to focus in the years ahead. We have to keep increasing the trade that creates broad-based growth. In East Africa alone, our new trade hubs have supported 29,000 jobs and helped increase exports to the United States by over a third. So we need to keep working to integrate African economies, diversify African exports, and bring down barriers at the borders. Since we're approaching 2 decades since AGOA was first passed, we're releasing a report today exploring the future beyond AGOA, with trade agreements that are even more enduring and reciprocal. We also have to keep making it easier to do business in Africa. We know progress is possible. A decade ago, if you wanted to start a business in Kenya, it took, on average, 54 days. Today, it takes less than half that. And governments that make additional reforms and cut red tape will have a partner in the United States. At our last forum, I announced the creation of our Presidential Advisory Council to guide our work together. And today I'm pleased to welcome the newest members of our expanded council so that more industries and insights can shape their recommendations. Feel free to find them later, bend their ear, don't be shy. They are excited about their work and excited to hear from you. We also need to invest more in the infrastructure that is the foundation of future prosperity. And as I indicated earlier, we're especially focused on increasing access to electricity for the 2/3 of sub-Saharan Africans who lack it. 3 years after launching Power Africa, we're seeing real progress. Solar power and natural gas in Nigeria, off-grid energy in Tanzania, people in rural Rwanda gaining electricity. This means that students can study at night and businesses can stay open, and we are not going to let up. Partners like the World Bank and the African Development Bank are mobilizing billions. Last month, the government of Japan made a major commitment to support this work. And together with GE, today we're launching a public-private partnership to support energy enterprises managed by women in Africa. So we're on our way, and by 2030, I believe we can bring electricity to more than 60 million African homes and businesses.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama has commended the efforts of Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari against Boko Haram, corruption, and reviving the economy. The U.S. President was speaking at a special meeting with his Nigerian counterpart in New York on the side of the United Nations General Assembly meeting. And reacting to Mr. Obama's commendations, President Muhammadu Buhari expressed appreciation to the U.S. President for his support for Nigeria's democracy.
It's a great pleasure to once again meet with President Buhari of Nigeria, along with his delegation. Nigeria is one of the largest, most populous, and most important countries, not just in sub-Saharan Africa, but in the world. And I am very pleased that we have been able to build a very strong working relationship with President Buhari as he's come in and initiated some very bold efforts at reform. On the security front, real progress has been made in coordinating regionally to restrict Boko Haram, a brutal organization affiliated with ISIL that has killed an enormous number of people and decimated communities there. Because of President Buhari's leadership, he has been able to refocus the Nigerian military. We are coordinating carefully, and we discussed here today additional ways that we can make further progress, not only in destroying this branch of ISIL, but also to make sure that the people in this region are able to recover from the devastation of Boko Haram's occupation. That includes making sure that humanitarian aid is getting in. There is real danger of famine and hardship in these areas because farmers were not able to grow crops and engage in traditional agricultural practices. And so we had a discussion about how we can work together to ensure an international response and then move forward to help these communities rebuild. We also had a discussion about how during a difficult time for Nigeria, given its role as an oil exporter, we are looking to help in any ways that we can to facilitate a reduction of conflict in the Niger Delta region a major oil-producing region, but one that has been marred by a number of militant organizations that have expropriated or siphoned off oil revenues. And the President, I think wisely, is heading up a delegation to bring various stakeholders together and try to make progress on that front. We want to be helpful in any way that we can. We discussed broader issues of development, and the President's taking some very bold economic reforms, including allowing for flexibility in exchange rates, refocusing on agricultural production, and we pledge to offer all the assistance that we can in those areas. And as the President is trying to stamp out corruption, to recover external funds that may have been illegally obtained and are sitting in bank accounts around the world, as he continues to work to make sure that the security forces inside Nigeria are abiding by professional and human rights standards. What we've pledged is that we will partner in any ways that we can to be helpful. And in the meantime, I also want to thank the President for having been a great partner with us on a range of international challenges of great importance, including around issues like climate change and dealing with pollutants like hydrofluorocarbons, where Nigeria has actually been an excellent partner. So we wish President Buhari well. He's going to be president longer than I am, but that gives us a sense of urgency to make sure that we've done everything we can to put in place the framework for cooperation and partnership for many years to come. Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We have, when I say we, I mean Nigeria benefits tremendously from the United States understanding and cooperation and backing politically and security-wise. Politically, after 16 years and 8 successive governments of the other party to the United States and Europe, that made it absolutely clear that elections should be held according to Nigerian constitution. That really stabilized the polity in Nigeria and help change in government. And when we came back, our major problem we identified and we mentioned during our campaign is about security, economy, and corruption. And in each of the 3 identified objectives, the United States help us, training our military, helping with hardware and software. That's why we are very successful in the northeast, where Boko Haram was holding clearly 14 out of 774 local governments, and they declared a caliphate. Now they are not holding a single one, and they are reduced to what we call using improvised explosive devices and attacking soft targets. And then the training teams we received from the United States and the hardware and software help has helped to stabilize it. And in the south, the militants there we are being helped again with intelligence and advice and training, and we believe things will be okay. Diversifying the economy, we made the mistake of being a mono economy. Until now, we found out putting the bills on food importation would be difficult. So we went into agriculture. We are very grateful for the advice we have been receiving. So I don't think Nigeria can thank the United States enough in terms of helping us in the security and the economy. So We are really very grateful, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
And you wish him well in his retirement.
And I wish you a peaceful retirement.
Thank you so much.
This is all we have for you on this round of this day. Thank you for being part of the program. My name is Tunde Alabi. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye. Of our continued efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create a platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely green community in the United Kingdom, our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV.